So I'm going to give you guys my analysis of Disney Pixar's new animated film, Soul. So the way I found out about this movie actually is on Christmas night. I was on Instagram and I was looking at stories, and on one of my favorite artist stories, Wow Grey Deluxe, Ian from Earth Gang, they were like, everybody needs to go watch this movie. This is the best Black people have ever looked in an animated movie. And that really intrigued me, and I was like, you know what, that's very, very fair, that's valid as fuck. I want to go watch this movie now. So some background on that, if you're not very engaged on the historical context of that, is Disney has a very dark history of portraying Black people, African American people, in a negative light, in a way that's like derogatory, by emphasizing certain characteristics, making fun. You know, you can YouTube it. It's really disgraceful, given the time period that this all occurred in, like the early 1900s. You know, back then, even though slavery was illegal by law, segregation and racism, as today, is very much well and alive, but even more so back then, because it was culturally acceptable in American society to make fun of. And, you know, like, Emmett Till didn't happen that long ago. Like, so it's a big deal, if you get what I'm saying. Do you understand? I really hope you understand. I feel like I don't always convey things, but it's a big deal, because even though it was a long time ago, it really wasn't that long ago. So in the last few years, there are definitely companies who have done a good job at incorporating more people than, like, other than the standard European person, right? And this includes like color, body types, genders. You know, there are definitely films to be applauded for incorporating all kinds of people under the spectrum. So of course this movie is one to watch because it's kind of like a step in the right direction. So after I watched the movie the next day, I saw on the interwebs people criticizing it, and saying not portraying Black people as Black people for the entirety of the film. Because another way that Disney has historically kind of backhandedly portrayed African American people is by only portraying them as a person for a short time, or portraying them not as a person at all, but as an animal. So that kind of gives off like, oh, they're less than, this character is less than. So it's still not been, representation has not been adequately met. So that's kind of the deal. And I wanted to like talk about that, and I wanted to think about it, and I wanted to share my opinion. But I also want to preface with, whoever's watching this, your opinion and your feelings about this topic are valid. And if you are a person of color, I feel like your feelings about this are definitely valid. I also feel like your feelings on this probably hold more weight than my feelings. But we're all individuals and we are entitled to our opinions. So this is just my analysis of this, because I feel like there are two very key things in the movie that kind of indicate that maybe this isn't the same as The Princess and the Frog, because I saw that was an argument being used a lot, which I honestly, it's been so long, I think I was a kid when I watched that, I don't even remember, but I do think there's an African American character who was a frog, and that was kind of it. So, which wasn't fair, and you know, it's not adequate representation. But in watching this movie, so here's the thing. I really, really love art, and I love animated films. Like, I'm 26 years old, and I sleep with Simba every single night. Because Lion King is probably my #1 favorite movie. 90s baby, 94 was a good year. And I love art because there's actually, it's funny playing words. I love art because there's soul behind it, you know? There's somebody put so much of themselves into, especially like back in the day with 2D animation, somebody put so much of their life, hours into making those lines and those colors and finding the perfect color scheme and just really being good at drawing something very quickly but consistently. Because you know, like back in the day, you had to like flip the pages to like see the cartoons move, right? So it's many frames over and over and over again. And for Lion King, probably because it's probably my favorite animated movie because they literally sent their crew to Africa to study how things looked so that they could most accurately capture and depict Africa and African culture and the animals. And that is so beautiful and that's so admirable. And I want to give credit to Soul for doing the same thing with John Baptiste. I understand that John Baptiste, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, was a sensational jazz player. They actually looked at real film of him playing the piano, and in the movie, the main character, Gardner, his hands were John Baptiste's hands, animated. And not only, they didn't like make him play some random keys, they actually studied the keys in the film and made him play the piano as if he was really playing the piano. It wasn't just made up mismatched music to visuals, it was matched music to match visuals. And I want to applaud Soul for doing that, for capturing that and depicting that in an artistic way, because we don't always see that, and that deserves some applause. So I thought that was really, really nice. And I just want to say also, as a lover of art, I haven't traditionally really loved 3D animated films. I feel like in the early 2000s, as people were kind of learning the craft, the 3D animations just were very ugly to me. Like I didn't feel like they captured artistically the subjects that were being portrayed like 2D animations like in Lion King did. I just didn't feel like it captured it, and I didn't really feel it was as admirable. I do feel like 3D animations have gotten better in the last few years. They definitely feel a little more artistic. I feel like Soul, the movie by Disney and Pixar, definitely is probably the best so far at capturing people. But not only that, I can tell that the animators really studied the mannerisms of a tall man, even a tall black man. You could say there is definitely some culture within the animation. But not only that, they studied the mannerisms of a cat. Like they got the mannerisms down pat. And I think when you parallel that to the animators of Lion King, I really think that deserves some applause, because that's really, really beautiful to be able to create art and convey it in a way that really resonates with what real life feels like. So I think that deserves some applause for sure, because I think the whole reason I wanted to watch this movie to begin with was because one of my favorite artists from Earth Gang literally said, this is the best that black people have been depicted in an animated movie. And I definitely think that rings true. I definitely think after I've seen the movie, that's definitely a true statement. And I think that's a progress. I think that's a step in the right direction. So, to the kind of drama that's on the internet going on right now, I just want to talk about 2 points that I feel like are worth us talking about. And I'd also like to offer, I think a lot of times in today's world, especially with the internet, people are so quick to hone in on, I've got to prove my point, and my point has to be heard, and you have to hear me, and you can't, your point doesn't matter because my point is right, and only my point is right. And I think that's problematic, because when we do that, we're feeding into kind of what we have seen America turn into, is like a very polarized, a yucky mess of people. Just no one wants to hear the other person out. No one wants to listen. Everybody wants to like kind of push and shove their own beliefs down somebody else's throat. And I think that that entitlement is what makes America not great. Is this, each individual is out for themselves, and each individual has this sense of entitlement, like, I don't want to do it if it's not going to help me. And I think that selfishness and that greed is kind of what we've become as a result of really extreme capitalism being all in our daily lives, to the point where like we don't even notice how it's infested our core individualism. So I just want to say that that is something that I really enjoyed about this movie, is that in a very artistic way, it challenged that. Because art has an extraordinary ability to make the comfortable uncomfortable, and to challenge your way of thinking, not necessarily in a direct way. And I really appreciate that from this movie. And you're probably wondering, why am I going on and on about this? It's because I also feel like that in America, part of capitalism and part of destroying this creativity, this innate creativity that we're all born with, is by forcing us all into a public school where our creativity is taken from us, where, you know, in the last, since the 1960s, everything has been boxed in. We've been pushed to be polarized, where everything has been standardized, literally standardized, so that you can't creatively answer a question. You have to pick A, B, C, or D. You have to pick yes or no. You have to pick blue or red. There's no in between offered as, or allowed to be offered as, this is actually a fair and valid point. You don't have to pick yes or no. You don't have to pick this or that. I feel like in the public school, we get really whittled down to the point where when we graduate, we get out of school and we try to be adults, we're so depressed and lost. We're really lost, that because all of this creativity that we would have has kind of just been squeezed out of us, you know? Just think about that. Like, I really think that's a fair point. And in a way, I think that this movie really served to capture that as well. So when you first turn the movie on, it is quite exciting. It is quite exciting because the main character is a black man, an African-American man. So yes, his name is Joe Gardner. And so right off the bat, right out of the gate, this is very, very exciting because the movie is a black man. And like, he's the main character, Joe Gardner, and you don't really see that often. So even me as a white woman, that's pretty exciting because this is not something I normally see. And not only that, but he is teaching a classroom of children who are also mostly black, which is very cool to see as well. I think there's like 1 or 2 kids in there that are white and of other ethnic descent, I don't know. Here's the thing with me about race is I've learned, you know, this is another thing. In America, they want you to think, oh, you have to be white or black. But there's so much in between because you could be like biracial or multiracial and you really can't tell what someone is. People like to guess, but you really could be really, really, really wrong about that. You know, just because you look a certain way. And I think that's what is so crazy because why are we so fixated with this, with categorizing people and boxing them in? At the end of the day, we are people, and your culture and your ethnicity definitely does matter. Don't let me, I'm not one of those I don't see color people, that's not me. I'm just like, why are we so obsessed with categorizing people and boxing people in? You know, it's not really fair to be like, to do that all the time. It really limits, it's really limiting. It doesn't capture that you're so much more. Anyway, so the students and even the principal, I'm pretty sure the principal is like not, it's a toss-up. The principal could be white, but I don't think the principal is white. I think the principal is Hispanic. And so this is right off the jump really, really beautiful. And then the next few characters are also black. Like it's his student and another woman and some jazz musicians. And so this is good. This is like out of the jump. I don't see white people dominating. There's not really a lot of white people. This is a nice change of scenery. What I really like about this movie is that they use literary tools like all up in it, which I guess in film they would be called film tools. I didn't take film school, so I don't really know like what the proper terminology is, but there's definitely literary tools because there's definitely foreshadowing, because right out of the gate, probably like 10 minutes, 15 minutes in, and I must say, like when you're watching this unfold, like in the first 5 to 10 minutes, you're like, oh, I get it. This movie is about soul, about black people having soul, because inherently most white people don't, because we don't have any rhythm and we suck at dancing and we're not really musically inclined, and you know, generally speaking. And oh, this movie's about soul. I get it, because it's all about this music teacher teaching music, and he's a musician, he's a jazz musician, and he has soul. I get it. Okay, so that's really exciting. And then like 15 minutes into the movie, if that, you see some foreshadowing. There's like character after character after character. He's like making these little mistakes, like life-threatening mistakes. And the characters are like, watch out, you're gonna get yourself killed. And bam, he falls into this hole and he dies. And that's what I'm talking about. There's like literary tools, like foreshadowing and stuff. I really, really appreciate this film implementing that degree of detail. And this is the part that people are tripping over, is because he dies, he's no longer in his body's vessel. His soul has left his body's vessel and is now just like this entity. So that's really interesting to me because of what spiritually that indicates to me. But this is what people are angry about, is that half of the movie, and it's really not half, it's probably like a third, he's this little blue blob. And I want people to really think about what that means artistically, and what the movie was trying to convey by making him a blue blob. Is the whole idea around this is that your soul transcends a physical body, that your body, your vessel, is just something, a physical construct to hold on to your soul. And as humans, we aren't all knowing. In the Bible, you know, it's taught to us, you know, don't ask questions. You're not ever going to know the answer to everything. You know, it's kind of shunned because Christianity is a fear-based religion. It teaches you to fear asking questions. But Hinduism actually teaches you to ask questions and to be still and to ponder life and to humble yourself by listening to others and and listening rather than speaking, and listening and observing rather than reacting. And it teaches you that, you know, the goal of life is to kind of reach that transcendental ability to become more godlike. And, you know, in parallel, Christianity wants you to become Christ-like. And the whole idea is to become this better person while you're actually on earth before you pass away and go to whatever's next. And to me, I really appreciated that, and I really thought that was a really beautiful element of the movie, because growing up in the South, in Alabama and Georgia, like, yes, I grew up Southern Baptist, I was brought up a Christian, but in 2013, my freshman year of college, I studied abroad, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to go to Southeast Asia and go to 3 different countries and go to Islamic mosques and go to Buddhist temples and Hindu temples. And I also took, in college, I took Catholicism because all I grew up around was baptism and Methodist and a couple of the Jehovah's Witness people. So in college, I really wanted to learn more about religion and other people's beliefs. And what I learned from that was that I don't know, like in the South, they try to make you think that your religion is superior and that your religion is the best and everybody else is just bad, and they're bad because they don't believe and you need to make them believe. It's a real superiority complex. What I learned from traveling abroad and from going and learning from other people and other cultures is that we're actually so much more alike than we are different, because our beliefs really do align. And if you factor in like the historical and geographical context that, you know, over time, of course, and with language barriers, of course, these stories are probably going to be very similar because we're all human, and in some way we're pretty all interconnected. And because we're all human, we're going to have similar thoughts. That's how, like, scientists in one part of the world and the scientists in another part of the world can have the same idea and kind of submit it at the same time. That's what happened with Darwinism. There were 2 scientists that submitted their ideas at about the same time about evolution. It was just that Darwin happened to submit his, like, I think like a month or 2 sooner. But they were on separate parts of the world, so they didn't have any connection to each other, but we're all human. So of course they're gonna have similar ideas because we're human, we're all human. And I think that this film did a really, really good a really good job at, from the very beginning, once he's in this like after death, pre-death place, they do a good job at taking a lot of care to break down what is going on. And they do this, of course, because this is a children's movie, so mostly children are not watching this, but also adults are watching this because, let's be real, we're all really big kids at heart, no matter how old we are. I saw, like, on the comment section of Facebook where people were arguing about this movie yesterday, there was an 87-year-old woman who watched this. And mind you, she loved it. She thought it was fantastic, and she said that even she learned something from this movie at 87 years old. So, I think that's really beautiful and deserves praise for how they went about taking special care to break down what this pre-post life place was. And so when Joe Gardner dies and he goes to this place, they call it the Great Beyond, which, and I say they, like the filmmakers. And I think this is really important because the filmmakers knew that this being an American movie, mostly Christians are probably going to watch this, right? So everyone everywhere has a different idea of what happens after you die. Even if you are Christian, you probably don't have the exact same vision for what death looks like as another Christian, because there's definitely different divisions, deviations of Christianity, right? So not everybody envisions the same thing for after you die. So instead of, they leave this to be pretty ambiguous, and I think that's good. Joe Gardner even says, is this heaven? Is this hell? And they're like, no, this is the great beyond. This is where it happens to you after you go. And so they leave it pretty ambiguous, which I think is good because that's gonna make it more relatable for everyone, right? So, and I really thought this was funny because some people that were on Facebook on the comment section of like the NPR article that was posted about this, they were like, this is not a children's movie. This is way too, this goes against everything about Christianity. And it's just like, Susan, oh Susan, you are a victim of that superiority complex because your mind is just not open. You aren't humbled enough to be able to consider that, hey, maybe your belief is not the correct belief. You know, you're entitled to your belief. You're allowed to believe what you want to believe, but you don't get to like shove that down other people's throats, you know? And I think, you know, kudos to Black Panther for calling all us shitty white people out and calling us colonizers, because that was valid as fuck. That's where, Karen, that's where that term comes from. You're a colonizer because you want to force your beliefs down everybody's throat. Okay? That's what that means. Okay? It's bad. You don't want to be like that. We don't like that. Okay. So, I really appreciate that the movie took a great deal of care to really break this down and put it in a way that a child can understand. Another thing that I noticed in the comment section that kind of really ticked me off was somebody was like, this was a great movie, but it's really not for, you know, 4-year-olds because like, it's just too heavy for a 4 or 5-year-old. And I hate that because I don't feel like we give children enough credit. They really do have a really good understanding of like what's going on around them. They're really, you know, they're really sensitive and cognitive creatures. They're smarter than we give them credit for. You know, I think at 2 years old, they really start to take a great deal of notice of what is going on in their environment, and that really shapes them for what they're gonna become. There's epigenetics, you should study it. It's really cool science. So yeah, I don't agree with that. It's definitely something that's tangible and palatable for a young child. And I think even at 5 and 6 years old, I was reading about other religions, and I noticed then that, wow, we're really all the same, and all this fussing about religions is really stupid because we're all humans at the end of the day. And no one religion is correct, you know? Like, so I hate people who don't give kids enough credit. Like I said, it's like the system really that makes us into shitty people, because as a kid, we're like innocent and pure. And then it's really life that takes that away, you know? And I like, the movie actually makes a funny joke about that in the movie. Watch out for that. I'm trying not to be a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but they make a funny joke about that, and it's really funny. Like, I was laughing the whole time I was watching this movie. So, I'm gonna wrap up because, as you know, I talk way too fucking much. I'm all alone, so I don't have anyone to talk to. So, going back to, does this film inadequately portray an African American man by making him a blob most of the time, or half of the time, or a third of the time? To be quite frank, if they hadn't made him a blob, there wouldn't have been a movie, because the movie is about a soul. Unlike what I originally thought the movie in the first 10 minutes was about black people having musical and rhythmic soul, that's not what the movie's about, actually. It is about the fact that we all have a soul, and that this physical thing, skin, costume, whatever you want to call it, is really temporary. It's not permanent, because our soul transcends this world. And that's kind of what the movie is getting at. So I feel like if they hadn't really, I feel like, and the movie touches on that, because in the movie there's these counselors who are like with the little baby souls and with the old souls, and so there's new souls and old souls, and then there's the counselors. And the counselors are kind of in a way like godlike. They're not human, that's for sure. They may not be gods, but they're not human. And they draw them as one-line characters. So in art, if you don't know, there's a creative exercise to draw things in one swoop. So they draw them as that, and they make a comment and say, oh, we look like this because your human minds cannot conceive. You're basically too simple-minded of creatures to really conceive what they are. And I really appreciated that, because that's what Hinduism talks about, is that as a human, we will never be able to grasp the godness level of things. We're just too simple-minded of creatures. And in the movie, they make fun of us and kind of are like, oh, humans, you're so basic. You're always looking for the purpose of life. You're so basic. It's so much more than that. It's so much more complex than that. And it's at the same time more simple than that. So I really appreciated that they, in a very artistic way, made fun of people and how closed-minded we tend to be, and indirectly kind of made you think about that. So in the movie, it's kind of the point. Him being a blob is the point, because as humans, we don't have like the capacity to really fathom much more than that. You know, like this could be like 4D or 5D, but our perception limits us. Our brain limits us to what we are able to perceive. That's why if you twist your tongue and you touch it, you're gonna think that you're gonna feel it being touched on this side, because there's a limit to what your brain is able to perceive. And light is a perception, and there's a limit to our vision, right? Every single person has a different vision. Not everybody's vision is the same. So whether that has to do with distance or color, like there's a spectrum to everything. And that's what this movie kind of talks about. And in the movie, it makes a point to really outline this for everyone. And it says, for the little young blob 22, which also could be considered a symbol of alignment because it's 2-2. Just food for thought. But they ask, Joe Gardner literally says, why do you have the voice of a middle-aged white woman? Because some people were criticizing, saying it's like this blob saves him. And that's really not at all what happens. It's more so that this blob challenges the main character and the audience members' perception of what life is. And it's like, the blob is like, oh, I'm not a middle-aged white woman. This is just the voice I chose. I could have this voice, this voice, this voice, this voice. You know, like the blob changes its voice and is like, I could be anything. I could be any person on earth. I could jump into any body on earth. This is just the voice that I feel like using because it's effectively annoying. Hey, Karen, you're annoying. It's true. And that's kind of like they're making fun of Karens. Like in the movie, they make fun of Karens without using the word Karen. I mean, come on. That's funny. That's funny. So I just want to like give credit to that because it's like they not only is he not like an animal, he's a soul. Like I think that's so much bigger than being a person. That's so much more beautiful than, I just feel like that really is beautiful because we're talking about being more than this skin suit that we get fitted into or sorted into upon birth, you know? Even though I was brought up Christian, I definitely have more open-minded beliefs. I definitely believe in reincarnation. This movie does not talk about reincarnation. In fact, it seems to point towards not being reincarnated. But I do believe in reincarnation, and I really appreciated that this movie allowed room for people who do or do not believe in reincarnation, because the idea is that I have past lives, this current life, and the future life, and in my past and future lives, I may not be a white woman. I may not be a woman at all. I may not be a human at all. I don't know. All I know is that these bodies are temporary, and I really appreciate that the movie left room for people who don't believe one narrow way of believing. I really appreciate that they left room for more abstract thought, and that they not only left room but encouraged it. I will say, when I first saw this criticism, I asked the question, you know, let's talk about this. This is a true and valid concern, because historically Disney has a bad reputation of doing this to Black characters. This is very valid, this is very true. We need to examine this and look at this. And I was like, you know, taking aside the fact of him being a blob, like, he isn't a cat. He isn't a cat fit the rest of the costume, and the white woman's voice isn't the Black character's voice to convey. So I was like, what does that mean? And I'm like, okay, well, let's think about why they would do this. This is a children's movie, so for children, they need to be able to convey to them, hey, they switched bodies. So physically, that's why they would do that. They would have the voices switch bodies audibly, so that a child can make that connection of, why is this happening? But there's a key scene where they did this well. And there's a scene where the man, Joe Gardner, is with his mother, and to the audience, so basically to the audience, we see that. We see the voices switch bodies, and that's so that we know what's going on. But there's a key scene where they even do a swivel of the camera, and they let you see what's really going on to the other characters in the movie. And the other characters in the movie, Joe Gardner and still has his voice. To everybody else in the movie, he sounds like himself. And for a few split minutes, maybe seconds, they show this. And I think that's a very critical scene, because it shows to us, artistically, they did this switch to convey this thought, this idea to the audience. But his voice in the movie is still connected to his body. And I think that's really important. And I also think it's really important that in the movie, there's only like 2 white characters. I think there's like 1 white student. There's one student who may or may not be white. She's a kind of an important character. It's hard to tell. And there's, I think the doctor's white, but maybe not, also hard to tell. And the cat, the owner of the cat, she's white. But there's a lot of characters, I'd say like 20, maybe 30 characters in the movie, and it's all Black. And I really feel like that's really, really a nice thing to see. That is so nice and refreshing. It's definitely a step in the right direction. I definitely feel like they did a good job with this movie. I would just say to people who are saying, like, is this adequate representation? I would just say, at the end of the day, you're definitely entitled to your feelings. Your feelings are valid, and you have every right to feel how you feel about this. I would just hope that we're not taking a trend on the internet and just like agreeing with it from like this surface level, just like, oh, I read this couple sentences, I read about that from a headline, I don't really want to watch the movie. I would just hope we're watching the movie and making our own opinions and not basing our opinions off someone else told you. It's just like if you're at work and someone tells you that she's a bitch, like, are you gonna feel like she's a bitch just because someone told you you're a bitch, or are you gonna go get to know that person and decide for yourself if she's a bitch? It's the same thing. And I would say, like, definitely if you're a person of color watching this, please don't think that I'm saying don't feel how you want to feel. Like, please don't think that. I definitely feel like a person of color, their feelings on this movie have way more weight than my feelings on this. This is just my analysis of the movie coming from an art perspective, a historical perspective, and a personal perspective. And I would definitely love to have a conversation with someone about this. Super open to conversation. I'm just not open to, you know, other people shutting other people down. Like, I feel like in life, that's all at the end of the day anybody really wants, is to be heard. So like, I'm definitely down to hear you, and I want other people to be heard. I want other stories to be told, and I guess that's why I like this movie, is it's giving an entire culture an opportunity to be heard that isn't often enough given. And I think that's really, really beautiful, and it's really needed, especially at the end of 2020, because there's so many stories and people who lost their lives this year, and those are stories that deserve to be heard. And Breonna Taylor's murderers should still be arrested for murder. We still need to do that. So thanks for listening to my video, and yeah, have a good night or a good day.